The Michigan State Spartans pulled off a dominant, emotional win over Indiana on Tuesday evening. Does this team have the horses to make a late run and turn some heads in the NCAA tournament?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up? Welcome to the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Andy Patton, and this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Matt Sheehan, the host of the Locked On Spartans podcast, talking a few days after Michigan State's emotional and dominant win over Indiana on Tuesday evening, the first home game for the Spartans after the tragedy that took place on campus last week. Matt, every win over a ranked team feels good. There's no doubt about that. But you got to imagine that this game hits a little bit different considering the circumstances in East Lansing, the mass shooter situation that happened last week. What has been kind of the mood around the team, and kind of obviously the mood on campus can't be great right now, but seeing a victory, seeing an incredibly emotional Tom Izzo over the last week, really kind of what does that mean for this program?
A lot. It means a lot, but it also means very little at the same time. And Tom Izzo is more eloquent about it than I will ever be. He said that, hey, you know what? We're playing this game. Hopefully for 2 hours, this can be a distraction. But we know at the end of the day, this isn't going to heal the wounds that were made last Monday. Obviously, you know, he wears his emotions on the sleeve, but I was very fortunate to be at that game as well. And there were a lot of emotions on a lot of people's sleeves. You saw it on the team as well, and not to the point, you know, that they're physically showing sadness or anything, although that certainly has to be there. But they were a little tight to start the game. Our starting point guard, AJ Hoggard, 3 turnovers in the first 6 minutes, and then he just settled in and exploded the rest of the game, top to bottom. You know, if we're going to talk about what happened in between the lines, it was a great game from every single player that played for Michigan State. But yeah, slow start, understandably so. Indiana's just a good team, you know, that whole thing, but everything that's going on outside of the lines as well. So many eyeballs on these kids. And also, too, at the end of the day, they still are students. And there was a lot of gravity there, too, the walk to the stadium because, you know, we passed the student union. Which was one of the buildings where it all happened. I mean, that's absolutely harrowing. We walked by the Sparty statue, and it's not in the middle of campus, but it is central to a lot of foot traffic. Passed it hundreds of times in my life, and it's just covered with so many flowers, tributes, and campus just felt different. But you know what? Yeah, when the game was going on for those 2 hours, the community had something to take their mind off it for a little bit, and it was very cathartic at the end when you obviously, you know, win. So it was a relieving, celebratory, but yeah, just so many emotions, man. It's really hard to articulate it perfectly.
Yeah, of course it is. And it's tough because, you know, you want sports to be a distraction. And we talked a little bit about this offline. Too often right now, especially in college basketball specifically, they're almost creating the distraction. We know the Alabama situation with Brandon Miller and Nate Oates and everything that's going on there. And later in this podcast, I'm talking to a reporter covering New Mexico State, Colin Dever, and the situation going on there with also a gun violence situation. And in this situation, I guess it's nice in a way that the sports really were the distraction. They weren't the active.
That's true. Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from the, you know, the horrifying situation that happened. 4 people lost their lives, 5 more injured. And sports, I think, can serve a really valuable role in here. But like you said, it also kind of feels like it means so little. I think that was a perfect way to say it. It means so much in the sense that it was a distraction, a welcome sight to see this emotion, see this team band together, get a win over a team that, you know, is a very good basketball team in Indiana, pull off a win that maybe they weren't expected to get. But at the same time, I don't want to say it feels hollow, but it doesn't change what happened.
It's weird. Like in the moment, it meant a lot. It was amazing to be there for the win, and it just feels so good for the players too. And you know, just all the kids in the Izzo zone as well. Like you feel good for them. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like man, like this is still going to be around this community for months, years to come. So and I mean, Izzo's talked about it too. They had this little video before the Michigan game, and that was MSU's first game back last weekend, and it was just camera on Izzo, him talking. And he said, look, we're not trying to play to make us feel like we're bigger than the situation. Like we're just trying to be the small little outlet for this community. And they've done a fantastic job at that. And so hat goes off to all these kids. I got just to even play after that happened is a lot, but to play as well as they have the last 2 games. Yes, they lost to Michigan, but the first 35 minutes of that game, it was like, oh my God, these kids are real headstrong. So I mean, not enough credit can go to the coaching staff and all these kids on the team.
Well, as seamlessly as we can, we're going to attempt to transfer to mostly talking about the actual
There's no good way to do it. Yeah, I've been trying to do it all week, and there's no good way to do it.
No, there absolutely is not. But like you said, Michigan State's now won 3 of their last 4 games. They got 3 Big Ten games remaining. They're at Iowa. They're at Nebraska. They got a home game against Iowa State, a really big one there. Looking at the Big Ten standings, as we're talking right now, 6 teams have a 9-7 record in conference play. This conference, there is not any separation right now. Purdue had some separation. They kind of lost it a little bit. For Michigan State, they're not winning the conference, but if they win out, there's a chance that who knows how everything else is going to shake out, but there's a chance that they could win out, carry some significant momentum into the Big Ten conference tournament. If they're to do that, if they're to win the next 3 games, 5 of their last 6, what do you think needs to happen? What is the main recipe for this team to be able to do that and carry that momentum into March?
There's no better time to ask that question than what we saw last night. Look, for here and there throughout the season, it really feels like AJ Hoggard and Tyson Walker are the best backcourt in the conference. It's like, oh my God, these guys are the best guard duo, maybe even in the nation. And you watch a game like last night where they have a combined 45 points between the two. It's like, oh yeah, that's what we need for a March run. I mean, March runs are predicated on, great guard play, some veteran leadership, which Michigan State has, some good shooting. Saw that again last night. Solid perimeter defense. We saw that again last night. So it's like after that game, Andy, that's a great time to ask that question because that's exactly what has to happen. Everything you saw last night. Yes, we do have our weaknesses. No question about that. Just like you said, we're one of the 57 teams with a 7-9 record in conference player, whatever it is. But the strengths can hopefully outweigh it here down the stretch. There aren't a lot of easy outs in Big Ten play, but at Iowa, at Nebraska, and home against Ohio State might be the best slate that you could possibly ask for if you're a team in this conference.
Yeah, it's absolutely doable. And I think the latest that we've seen from Joe Lunardi from the Bracketology Report has Michigan State on the 7 line. Obviously, that could change. Three more wins in Big Ten play and a solid showing in the conference, and you're probably looking at a 6 seed, maybe a 5 seed. That's probably asking for a handful of other teams to have some ugly finishes to the season. But 6 seed, 7 seed, wherever Tom Izzo's team ends up, you kind of talked about it right there. The recipe: veteran guards, well-coached team. They're kind of doing a lot of the things that tend to make up a recipe for a successful run through the NCAA tournament, especially for a team that's not going to be, one of the top 4 seeds. Right. Do you see those things kind of coming together? Like, do you think the veteran experience, is that going to be enough for this team to potentially maybe buck the trend of the Big Ten not particularly doing well in March and make a deep run here?
Got the coach to do it, right? I mean, the guy's only been to 8 of these Final Fours. But man, it is just, this team is human cryptocurrency. Like they go up and down so fast where it's like after games like last night, it's like, well, yeah, of course we're going to make at least a second weekend. Who cares if it's a 2 seed in the second round? Like we're going to be that team that no one wants to face. And then, well, you see some of these other games, namely on the road. Michigan State has really struggled on the road. And, it's like, we might not even make it out of that first round here. And then at some points of the season, it's like, oh my God, are we going to be in the first 4 again? Like, so it is just so spastic, but man, like Izzo, if there's one thing that we know him for, it's getting the team peaking at the end of the season. And look, what was yesterday step 1 of that, or was that just MSU playing with a lot of emotions in front of a great home crowd against an Indiana team that's put a lot of miles on their legs in the last month too? I don't want that to be missed as well. Indiana's a great team, but Trace Jackson Davis in his last 10 games, 7 of them, he played at least 39 minutes. So and we saw a little bit of it too at Breslin. Yes, solid defense played against him, great strategies, but the kid was gone. Like the kid's legs are out of here. So I hope it's the first step to a nice peak into March Madness. We'll have to just wait and see, though. You do get 3 good games here coming up. They're not walkovers necessarily. These aren't, no offense to the Minnesotas of the world, but like they are gettable. They're gettable, which we like.
At Iowa, February 25th, fantastic game. First opportunity for Tom Izzo to kind of really prove that this team is on a roll right now. Matt Sheehan, thank you so much for joining me today on the Locked On College Basketball podcast. Really appreciate your time. And hopefully we can kind of help a little bit of catharsis with everything that's going on in East Lansing right now.
100%. Hey, always great talking to you, Andy. You're the man.
Well, we talked about Alabama on Wednesday's show, but they are not the only program in hot water because of off-the-court issues. More on New Mexico State and their significant legal issues coming up. But first, today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Maybe you're feeling a big win for the Warriors on the road against the Lakers this evening. Maybe you like the Pacers to cover an 8-point spread at home against Boston. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, joined now by Colin Deaver, the sports director at KTSM TV, covering New Mexico State athletics. Colin, I got to be honest with you, man. So it's been a heavy couple of days here on the Locked On College Basketball podcast. Wednesday's episode, we talked at length about the Brandon Miller, Nate Oates, Jaden Bradley situation unfolding in Tuscaloosa. Earlier on this episode, I recorded with Matt Sheehan, the host of the Locked On Spartans podcast, and we talked about Michigan State and obviously their kind of cathartic win over Indiana in light of the mass shooting that happened on the campus at East Lansing. So, of course, here we are continuing to talk about off-the-court issues. New Mexico State, boy, howdy, have they had their share of them just this season. It has been a year ago, Colin, 1 year, not even a year ago, 11 months ago, basically, this team beat UConn in the NCAA tournament. What a year it has been. Greg Heiar takes over as Chris Jans moves on to Mississippi State. Greg Heiar takes over the program. And in 1 year, we saw a deadly shooting take place that involved a player. We saw a report of a pretty horrific hazing incident, or multiple hazing incidents, I should say, that cost him and his staff their jobs. We have seen this program just completely get shut down, which is extraordinarily rare in today's age, especially as we know how profitable college basketball, and particularly how profitable college basketball is for mid-major programs like New Mexico State. And secondary, well secondary beyond all of that, the team wasn't very good on the actual basketball court. On top of all of that, this is a team that won, I think they lost 9 games in a row in the WAC. They went 2-10 in conference play before forfeiting their final 6 games. Did I cover it all? Did I miss anything? It feels like it's been an insane year for this basketball program since last year.
Yeah, you did a pretty good job of wrapping it up. I would add to it, they had a assistant coach, a defensive analyst was his official title, who was arrested in the Chicago airport on their trip when they went to the, like the teams will take like overseas trips, like in the summertime, you're allowed to do it every 4 years or whatever it is. They went to the Bahamas and he was arrested in the Chicago airport and then subsequently fired because of forgery charges. That was in August. I didn't know about that one. And that one was, when it happened, it's like, well, I have to say, forgery charges, yes, it's a crime, but is it the most serious thing? Of course not. So, it was just kind of like, okay, they did what they had to do there to let the guy go. The other kind of big key note that you didn't mention, it is kind of key to this, is there was a fight at the New Mexico State, University of New Mexico football game in Las Cruces that featured 2 NMSU basketball players and multiple UNM students. And that is the alleged precursor to the shooting in Albuquerque on November 19th that featured NMSU basketball player Mike Peake. Of course, the Aggies were in Albuquerque that night to play UNM the next day. And Peake, of course, allegedly lured out of his hotel room by a female UNM student, where he was then basically ambushed by 3 UNM male students, one of whom had a gun, pointed the gun at Peake, and they hit him with a baseball bat, started shooting at him. Brandon Travis, who is the UNM student with the gun, was killed by Peake, who obviously had his gun. Travis was shot 4 times and killed. Peake was shot once and injured. So it's been, as you mentioned, just an insane year. Just tragic, right? I mean, you brought up at the beginning they beat UConn. 11 months. I was in Buffalo that night, and it was one of the highlights of my career to this point was watching Teddy Allen just go nuts against UConn, and to see them where they've gone from that to this. I mean, it's just tragic. I mean, the shooting, especially. I mean, that's 5 lives that are changed forever. With one, Brandon Travis loses his life, and 4 other, well, I guess it's. So 4 other people whose lives are just changed forever. I mean, it's just been tragic, and I don't want to take away from that, because the loss of life in that was just the most important and tragic aspect of it. And then obviously you have everything else surrounding the basketball team, which has been insane to say the least. So
absolutely, it's an incredible amount of things to happen to one program. I mean, each of these instances, with the exception of maybe the forgery instance, everything else would be like the defining moment of the basketball season. Obviously a player brandishing a gun on away from the team. And even if he was acting in self-defense, which it sounds like is generally the case, that's still an incredibly noteworthy story. And then you tackle on top of that the hazing incidents, the story there, which is just horrifying. I mean, quite honestly, the way that some of these players were treating their own teammates, the way that the coaching staff seemingly turned a blind eye to this. I mean, to have all of this piled on top of the incident in November and the shooting that happened there. I mean, it's not surprising to see the athletic department make the moves that they made and just kind of swiftly say, hey, we're just going to be done with this entirely. When you look at the full scope of everything that happened, I can understand why you would see that decision. But still, as somebody who's covered this team for many years, were you surprised to see New Mexico State come out and say, hey, we're done with the staff and we're just done with the team for the rest of the
year? After the hazing allegations surfaced, no. The night that they suspended the season indefinitely, which is a Friday night before they were going to play Cal Baptist on a Saturday. Right. I mean, that was genuinely, stunning. But once you learn more, then it becomes obvious, okay, where this is going. They kind of had no choice but to just cancel the season altogether. Yeah. And I will say the obviously Coach Heiar has been fired. We do not have a resolution completely on the assistant coaches yet. They've said this. The administration has said they're waiting for investigations, what have you, to be completed before they make a decision. I think anybody who knows anything about college basketball, I mean, even regardless of like a scandal like this, when you bring in a new head coach, it's kind of rare for the entire staff to stay anyway.
Sure, totally.
So I think anybody can see the writing on the wall there that, just because that move hasn't been made yet doesn't mean the move isn't going to be made at all. And so I think that may be one of the next shoes to drop here, is, the kind of like the status of that. And then also too, I mean, what certain coaches did or did not know about, these hazing allegations. Certainly if they did know, that's obviously a massive issue. Right. But if they didn't know, I think it's an issue as well, because this is the program. It's your program and it's your culture that you're developing. And that was a point that the NMSU athletic director, the chancellor, made time and time again last week, was the culture of the program was, to use their words, was infected. Yeah. So, I mean, that's I guess what I would say about that aspect of it. And just, again, to say how quickly it happened, right? To go from winning a tournament game last March to here we are, February 12th was the official day they shut the program down for good, and you fire a head coach on Valentine's Day, was just incredible to watch and kind of see in real time.
I'm curious. So I know, at least, and I think many people know, that I mean, obviously, who you hire as a head coach is monumentally important for every program, whether it's a women's rowing team for a mid-major school, whether it's a football program at Alabama. Like it's who is running the ship, who's running the program is very important. But to me, mid-major athletics, especially like high sports in mid-major athletics, so like mid-major football, mid-major basketball, it feels to me like it is so critical what it can do. And obviously, so I haven't hidden this on this podcast. I am a Gonzaga graduate. I host the Locked On Zags podcast as well. Clearly, when you hire somebody like Mark Few, you can see what it can do to your program. Most teams don't hit a home run quite like that. That's pretty astronomical, but we've seen it with other mid-major programs. You know, when Loyola Chicago goes on an incredible run, when George Mason goes on an incredible run, VCU has Shaka Smart for a period of time. Like, you can see these programs make these home run hires. And to me, it's easier to make a mistake as a mid-major school and kind of you can kind of hide it a little bit. If, you know, I'll use Terry Porter as an example at the University of Portland, where, hey, that was just a bad era. Things went badly, but there wasn't massive incidents. They were just not a good basketball team. They replaced him. They hired Shante Leggins, and things have kind of picked back up. Seattle U, you know, I know a team that you've seen a little bit more. They've had some rough coaches right now. I think Chris Victor, they seem to be in a better spot right now. That's great. But you just can't make a colossal mistake. And there's not really any other way to beat around the bush here. This coaching decision was a disaster, a complete disaster. I don't think you can point the finger at the AD and say, you should have known this was going to happen. That's a little unfair, but I don't know if we've seen a coaching hire go this poorly in a really, really long time. So I think the main question right now for you, Colin, is kind of, how critical is the next step for New Mexico State? I mean, it feels like they're at a tremendous crossroads right now.
Yeah, I think this will be kind of the defining aspect now of Mario Mocha's tenure as athletic director at New Mexico State, where, first of all, how they handle these investigations regarding the shooting and these hazing allegations. Because to me, hiring a coach, while it is important, obviously,
sure,
it's secondary right now to everything else that they have going on. So, you know, how they handle that, and then how they go about hiring the next coach and who they hire, and then what happens. I mean, that's now, regardless, fair or not. And Mario Mocha has done some fantastic things while he's been at New Mexico State. This was a big miss, and again, like you said, I mean, no one can account for the fact that all of these things happened, right? It's to us at a certain point, I think it's out of people's control. I mean, but again, it's the culture, you know, set up by the coaching staff. So you have to, number one, bring in somebody who is going to very quickly, you know, correct the culture. Certainly this is a program that has consistently won, not just over the last 20 years, not just over the last 30 years. I mean, this is a program, you go back to the 60s and 70s. They went to the Final Four in 1970. So this is a program and a fan base that expects to win every year. And that is going to be important still moving forward. To me, as someone who covers the team and has kind of lived this in real time covering it, while I certainly understand, like, obviously, you know, everyone wants to win, you also have to prioritize some other things now, in my opinion. And I think they're going to be doing that. They said as much in the press conference last week. The chancellor and Mario Mocha, the AD, they both said that. We'll see if the actions are in line with the words at the press conference. But certainly, I mean, there were jokes being thrown around that, you know, NMSU is going to be the school that hires Chris Beard.
I was almost going to say it.
No, and I think, you know, I mean, that can't, I mean, you can't do that.
They can't. No, they absolutely can't.
No. So it's, having said that, like, there's good coaches that, you know, there's good coaches that have good track records. That can win and kind of clean things up, so to speak. So I think that, I mean, there's going to be some options. Is New Mexico State the most attractive job, even at the major level? No, of course not. But I think it's attractive enough that they're going to still have some people that are interested, that can kind of get things turned around from a cultural standpoint, and then also continue winning as well. So
Well, yeah, and I mean, you touched on it right there at the end. I mean, this is the team that's made 4 NCAA tournament appearances since 2017. So they have a rich history of being successful, but it's not like they have been down for a long time. I think people who might look at their record this season and certainly who maybe are familiar with everything that has happened will see, wow, this team lost 9 straight games in the WAC. They're terrible. It's like, yeah, they had a bad year, but again, made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament last year. The only years recently that they didn't make it were impacted by COVID. And you look back even before Jans was there, Marvin Menzies, 4 straight NCAA tournament appearances for that team as well. Like, this program has had a lot of sustained success. You kind of touched on it already, Colin, but I'll kind of ask maybe for an expanded answer here. How attractive do you think this job is? Because I think that they have been a powerhouse in an admittedly, not great conference, although a conference that is getting better. Utah Valley has looked good. We mentioned Seattle U has kind of emerged as a potentially solid team in that conference as well. But obviously somebody's going to need to come in and clean house. And like you said, I don't think any assistant coaches are going to keep their job, because I don't think any head coach is going to come in and retain any member of this previous staff, which may not be entirely fair if there are coaches who maybe were unaware of this, who were just kind of doing their jobs and didn't know what was going on. But you're probably going to come in, you're going to clean house. You're probably going to lose a lot of players. You probably should end up with a very different roster. Fortunately, we're in an era of the transfer portal where you can turn around a roster pretty quickly. And if they find a coach who maybe has good connections, maybe they're an assistant coach at the D1 level, maybe they're a head coach at a smaller program and can bring some talented guys with them, I don't think it's crazy that a program that, is ending their season early could actually turn things around in a relatively short period of time. That's not, people are afraid of like the SMU and the death penalty and, is this going to bury this program forever? And I don't think that that's necessarily the case, but as you alluded to, you got to get this one right. I mean, you can't take a gamble here at all. You got to pick the safest, most secure person who's focused on more than just the X's and O's. They're going to build a culture. They got to do all that stuff, and they got to get the right people on board. It's not an easy task, but to me, it feels like New Mexico State is a program that this may not be something that drags this program down into the depths of the cellar in the WAC for many years to come.
Yeah, and they are going to Conference USA next year too. So,
true.
There'll be some, and
forgot about that.
There's conference realignment has been crazy out of Levy. So, no, and I want to be clear too. Like, I don't think they are going to get, nor should or do they deserve the death penalty for this. Like, no. I just want to be clear about that. Yeah, I mean, as far as some possibilities, like, I think it's just too early to be completely like looking at like, who are they going to hire?
Right. Totally.
But even in a normal circumstance, there's still 4 games left in the regular season. So we aren't even in a normal circumstance, we aren't quite to like the coaching carousel yet. I do know, I mean, this guy would be like the home run of all home runs. But Bruce Weber was at Southern Illinois when Mario Mocha was there at Southern Illinois. Mario hired Jerry Kill as his head football coach in November of 2021. Kill was at Southern Illinois at the same time that Weber and Mocha were there together. Now, will Bruce Weber, who hasn't coached this year, is this a job that he would be interested in taking? I don't know, but I think if you're NMSU, you probably make the call, right? Yeah. I mean, that's a guy who took Kansas State to the Elite Eight 5 years ago. He went to the national title game at Illinois in 2005. I mean, he's a proven winner in the places that he's been. I think that would be the home run of home run hires. Yeah. I think that may be one of the first calls they make. But I will say I do think it does. Whoever it is, it needs to be somebody who has Division I head coaching experience. Yeah. Or somebody who knows kind of like the New Mexico State style, right? And has, maybe has been an assistant there before, associate head coach, whatever. But my personal opinion is that they're going to be targeting somebody who has been a successful head coach at a low major Division I. Is where I think that this is going to land. If their home run, the home run swings don't pan out.
Colin, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today to help break down a tragic and sad and still developing situation at New Mexico State. Hopefully this is a program that can rebound from this and get back to being one of the better and more unheralded mid-major programs in the country, because being in the news this year hasn't really been all that fun. So hopefully they can right the ship. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I always enjoy covering positive stories more than yes. negative stories. So from that standpoint, I hope that they are in the news for more positive reasons moving forward.
All right, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you to Matt and Colin for joining me here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. We are available wherever you get your podcasts. We are available on YouTube. Go hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. More fantastic content coming your way Friday, previewing an epic weekend of college basketball games as we get closer and closer to the start of the best month in the season, March, and of course the NCAA tournament and the big dance coming up your way very, very soon here. Locked On College Basketball. For now, peace out.